Welcome to Dataless You. I'm Paul, coming to you from Brooklyn. Today we are going to take a look at the art of the essay, writing a thesis. We're going to do a close reading of a paragraph from Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. Let's get started. Let's say this is your assignment. Choose a passage, a short passage from Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God to analyze. Write an essay on how Hurston uses language to create meaning in the passage. Your essay should contain a clear thesis and a discussion of at least 3 different literary devices. 2 or 3 pages in length should suffice. All essays are due tomorrow. Step 1, choose a passage. Step 2, analyze the passage. Step 3, write a thesis. So first, let me tell you a little bit about this novel before we choose our passage. Their Eyes Were Watching God was written by Zora Neale Hurston, and we're looking at a photo here of the author. She is the famous writer from the Harlem Renaissance. This novel tells the story of Janie Crawford, a woman living in North Florida, and it tells the story of her search for love. Over the course of the novel, Janie marries 3 different men, and we're catching up with her here at the tail end of her first marriage. So, Janie was raised by her grandmother, and when she came of age, she was essentially married off, or her grandmother more or less arranged this first marriage for her to a fine man named Logan, who loved Janie dearly, but unfortunately, Janie never came to love Logan, her husband. Even though her grandmother had promised her that marriage would bring love. For Janie, this does not come to pass, and it's the source of great disappointment. So time passes, and Janie's grandmother passes away. And we catch up with her right here in the final paragraph of chapter 3. So Janie waited a bloom time, and a green time, and an orange time. But when the pollen again gilded the sun and sifted down on the world, she began to stand around the gate and expect things. What things? She didn't know exactly. Her breath was gusty and short. She knew things that nobody had ever told her. For instance, the words of the trees and the wind. She often spoke to falling seeds and said, "I hope you fall on soft ground," because she had heard seeds saying that to each other as they passed. She knew the world was a stallion rolling in the blue pasture of ether. She knew that God tore down the old world every evening and built a new one by sunup. It was wonderful to see it take form with the sun and emerge from the gray dust of its making. The familiar people and things had failed her, so she hung over the gate and looked up the road towards way off. She knew now that marriage did not make love. Janie's first dream was dead. So she became a woman. A beautiful passage. So let's take a closer look. To analyze a passage, you want to reread it and think about each line individually. So this first line is very interesting. So Janie waited a bloom time, and a green time, and an orange time. Now those are very interesting words used to describe time. And the words that an author uses, the words that an author chooses for her work, well, that's called diction. So that in and of itself is a literary device that we can discuss in our paper. To my ear, this sense of a bloom time, a green and orange time, give us a sense of the passing seasons. Maybe green is spring and orange is fall, and bloom gives us a sense of, again, the cyclical nature of time. And also, I feel that just hearing these colors brings us into the inner life of Janie. She's undergoing a great transformation. Her grandmother has passed away, and spoiler alert, she's about to leave her first husband, with whom she was unhappily married. So, for some reason, the colors just give me this kind of more emotional gut level of Janie's life. So what else? Let's read on. But when the pollen again gilded the sun and sifted down on the world, she began to stand around the gate and expect things. So here we have this image of the falling pollen. And if you jump down, I'm going to jump down here to, she often spoke to falling seeds and said, I hope you fall on soft ground, because she heard seeds saying that to each other as they passed. So at this point, the combination of the pollen and the seeds and Janie's talking with the seeds, well, that's a metaphor. Essentially, the author is showing Janie identify with the seeds. And what do seeds do? Seeds grow. And Janie herself is ready for tremendous growth and self-actualization. The fact that she's talking with the seeds, she's communicating with the seeds, indicates that she too is a seed. Notice the next sentence brings another rather striking metaphor. The world was a stallion. So Janie is a seed, the world is a stallion. It's another metaphor. So what does that tell us? Well, picture a stallion rolling through the pasture, a stallion galloping, every muscle in constant flux. A stallion here is the image of change. It tells us of the essential characteristic of nature, namely flux. And Janie, in this metaphor, may be trying to ride that stallion, trying to navigate her changing world as she herself becomes a seed ready to bloom. So let's move on and look at what else we can discover. I'll change our color here. She knew that God tore down the old world every evening and built a new one by sunup. Well, sunup's a nice image, and I think that fits. We have imagery. Anytime you have an image, that is something you can talk about in your paper. So we have sunup, and in fact we have lots of nature imagery throughout the passage. If you look up here, we have the pollen, we have the trees and the wind, we have the falling seeds, of course, we have the pasture, we have the sun, again coming up in the next sentence. It was wonderful to see it take form with the sun and emerge from the gray dust of its making. I like this gray dust. To me, the gray dust is a nice image. You can see it. You can see the gray dust in your mind's eye. And also, if you think about it, maybe the gray dust also has some symbolic or metaphoric meaning. Maybe it symbolizes Janie's past, her marriage, and even the passing of her grandmother. These are the things now behind her, out of which the new world, the sunrise, the new blossom will grow. So that's 3. That's enough for our paper. But maybe we'll go for the extra credit. We'll add a quick 4th one, a kind of bonus one. I'm going to call it syntax. I want to draw your attention to sentences 3, 4, and 5. And just notice, all I'm saying about these sentences is that they're short. And listen to the effect that brings. What things? She didn't know exactly. Her breath was gusty and short. To me, these short sentences evoke the breathless and tumultuous inner state of Janie as she stands there gazing down the road of her own future. So syntax is merely the way an author builds or puts together her sentences. And so just the fact that we have here some short sentences evokes a kind of sense, this sort of breathless, what things? She didn't know. Her breath was gusty and short. So it gets us inside Janie's body, you might say, feeling her feelings. So there we have it. There's an analysis. So that essentially is the brainstorm, which we could then jot down and have summarized. We have our interesting diction that opens up the passage, the bloom time, green time, orange time. We have the metaphors we discussed, Janie a seed, the world as a stallion, all of the nature imagery throughout the passage, as well as the sort of bonus analysis of the short syntax. Now, look at how all of this builds and brings us to the last two sentences. She knew now that marriage did not make love. Janie's first dream was dead, so she became a woman. Beautiful writing that gives us a sense that indeed Janie is undergoing a transformation here at the end of chapter 3. The very last sentence, Janie's first dream was dead, so she dreamed that marriage would bring love. It did not. She's disappointed. So she became a woman. The so is very interesting. Notice the passage also starts with so it's kind of a key repetition. And the so tells us that because Janie is disappointed, she has become a woman. As if disappointment or failure or shortcomings in love are a kind of initiation that makes one a woman. So what you might do is look at all of your notes, think about it, and then try to boil it down to a single sentence. That's step 3. We finish with the analysis, and we want to write a sentence that captures all of these ideas. I've written one for us. Let's take a look. Through her use of diction, syntax, imagery, and metaphor, Zora Neale Hurston shows how Janie is intimately connected to nature, how nature's essential characteristic is constant flux, and how Janie herself is undergoing a transformation in this scene. She is becoming an independent woman. There you have it. You might introduce this thesis with a topic sentence and then give us another sentence sort of outlining where you're going with the paper in your opening paragraph. But we'll look at all of this in future videos. For now, I encourage you to pick up Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, if you haven't already, and read it. It's one of my favorite novels. It has a terrific ending. I think all novels should end with well, I won't spoil it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the future.